looking out my window, and I'm a thinking of tomorrow, and I'm a wondering what the future will be. Thinking.
Good evening, everyone. To you in Radio Land, on the internet and internet world at home and abroad. Thank you for choosing Q95. This is the Global View on Q. A very, very warm welcome to all of you in our Q family listeners at home and globally. I'm Sheridan Gregoire, Mr. G. It's Tuesday, 12th September, the 37th Tuesday of 2023. It's just about 5 minutes after 8 at the studios at Q95, the big station. We're live on Facebook and YouTube. Please follow us at Q95 FM Radio. The on-air phone numbers are all on the homepage of our website at www.q95da.com. Share the live, like our pages, get the latest breaking news and reviews only on Q95, the big station. We continue to revive the spirit of graciousness, of love and peace and prosperity and unity among our Kalinago and Afro-Caribbean brothers and sisters. And tonight, I'm delighted to be joined by very distinguished guests, former Prime Minister Edison Chenfield James, Justice Dr. Irving Andre will join us a little bit later, and diaspora resident Miss Marceline Edwards, who needs no introduction. She's here with us tonight. We will examine the current situation of Dominica's efforts to establish new electoral and campaign finance laws and regulations, the process and the tone of the consultations held recently in that regard. We will try to offer some suggestions that can improve that process going forward to eliminate partisan political campaign-style divisiveness, to ensure that every qualified citizen or resident can freely and fairly exercise their right to vote in their country's elections on a level playing field, with the ultimate goal of preserving our democracy, of course. Let us all be mindful, however, that the current parliament is the place where any new electoral and campaign finance laws and regulations must be tabled by the executive branch of the government for debate and for passage. Let us also remind ourselves that we are in the middle of an undertaking to appoint a new president to be our country's new head of state. I believe it is by the 1st of October of 2023 or thereabouts. And we are also in the middle of final preparations for the 2023 World Creole Music Festival. Here is the question. Is everything on track for this signature iconic bona fides homegrown Dominican world product? There are some rumblings here and there. No overseas promotions yet. I guess that Mr. Edison James knows a little bit about the World Creole Music Festival. He might want to say a couple of things about that a little later on. But I have a few questions and talking points, so please bear with me for a moment. Things keep coming up one after another every single day in Dominica. Some say Dominica is pregnant with issues, with no delivery on most of them. The government of Dominica recently held national consultations over a span of 3 weeks to allow Dominicans to make their contributions on Sudanese Byron's draft bills and regulations submitted for consideration to improve Dominica's electoral reform processes. Sadly, there have been many unfortunate concerns about the tone of the discussions at recently concluded electoral reform consultations organized by the government of Dominica and the Dominica Labour Party, which concluded on Thursday, 31st August 2023. It appeared that the consultation process was reduced to a battle between those who are in support of the government's position on overseas voters, national ID cards, uncontrolled, unaccounted campaign finance money, and those who are advocating for a solution to the vexing issues of the existing tainted electoral process on a level electoral playing field that can yield free and fair elections. There is no doubt that Sir Dennis Byron's failure to conduct appropriate open consultation requires that his draft legislation to incorporate the recommendations of the consultations must be reviewed by a broad-based oversight committee, that an independent arbiter be established and required to mediate the process given the special interests of the Dominican Labour Party as a beneficiary to the electoral process and its vested interest in protecting the so-called re-election legacy of its leader, Mr. Roosevelt's carrot. So numerous organizations and individuals have requested the establishment of such a broad-based committee to take over the process going forward with the collaboration and support of the international observer organizations that participated in the electoral consultation process as observers. The electoral reform process is at a critical juncture, and if not handled in a transparent manner, there is a risk of the process further disintegrated into chaos and the real issues of substance remaining disastrously unresolved, especially if some version of the legislation is enacted in Parliament with a government that has a 19-2 parliamentary majority. Therefore, to advance the process to a satisfactory, reasonable outcome, I recommend the following for our discussion tonight. I hope we will look at some of those. One, the government of Dominica establishes an electoral reform oversight committee to finally review Sir Dennis Byron's submitted draft bills and regulations and to incorporate the recommendations made at the various consultations where necessary and appropriate. Two, the review and oversight committee should comprise of the Attorney General, representatives of all bona fides political parties, private sector organizations, the Bar Association, the two church organizations that we know of, trade unions, youth organizations, and other appropriate sector representatives. A qualified and competent person, preferably a legally minded person, should be appointed to chair the review and oversight committee. That chairperson can be selected from a very short list of renowned and distinguished Dominicans and supported by one representative each from the OAS, the Commonwealth CARICOM, and the OAS Secretariats. The international organizations who have observed the process should be requested to assist the committee financially and have human and technical expertise as the need arises. The committee should be given 2 calendar months or thereabouts to complete the review process and present the final draft legislation to the Prime Minister in his capacity as the leader of the Parliament, and this should be made public. Number 6, the Oversight and Review Committee's work should be submitted to the Electoral Commission for a final review as required by Dominica's Constitution. As part of its review process, the Electoral Commission should also conduct a public awareness exercise about the final proposed draft laws and regulations before submitting the reviewed draft bills and regulations to the government for tabling in the Parliament. 7, all parliamentary representatives should be encouraged to discuss the new draft legislation and regulations with their constituents. All parliamentary representatives should also be allowed to vote independently in the Parliament according to their conscience, free of interference from political party leaders' directives. I hold a view that electoral reform legislation should be crafted, debated, and passed into law for the benefit of the nation as a whole and must not be tilted or tainted to the advantage of any one political party. I would like to see the existing electoral legislation in Dominica revised to reflect the right to free and fair elections on a level playing field that would be the envy of the Commonwealth of Nations as we promote genuine democracy in Dominica. My understanding is that the various organizations and individuals who have participated in the draft electoral legislation review process consider the idea of a broad-based oversight review committee as a reasonable approach to garner greater inclusivity, transparency, and consensus to help bring about agreeable closure in an amicable manner for the peace and tranquility of our nation. I hope that good judgment will prevail in these circumstances. This process going forward needs to be removed from the control of the political directorate and be moderated by neutrality and transparently. Be moderated more neutrally and transparently, rather. I will ask my guests to express their views on these and other matters related to electoral and campaign finance laws and regulations, the expected conduct of the parliamentary proceedings during the debate of the new draft laws and regulations, and the prospects for a healthy substantive parliamentary debate on the new proposed electoral laws and regulations. I will also ask my guests to help our listeners and Dominicans as a whole to understand what life is really like under dictatorial systems of government, and to show the stark difference between people's lives under a one-man dictatorial parliament and a functioning democracy that is based on free and fair elections on a level playing field. How people's lives are affected differently under a dictator versus under good democratic governance. I will also ask them to show the extent to which a vibrant, informed, balanced parliament can forestall further detrimental negative international collateral damage to Dominicans through the implementation of genuine electoral and campaign finance laws and regulations on free and fair elections. Now, let me remind you that electoral and campaign finance reforms and free and fair elections are meant to forestall dictatorial leaders from exclusively handpicking every candidate for election on a party ticket, and to provide good and accountable government that forestalls carefully handpicked thieves from kicking back non-stop billions into overseas accounts and into political party campaigns to keep a party in office for 50 years or more. Let us also be reminded that the real reason why Dominican Labour Party leader Roosevelt Skerritt wants to take control of the current system and the reformed electoral system is not because he wants to improve the quality of life of the people. It is mostly for the purpose of securing his so-called re-election winning legacy at any cost, and to continue transforming Dominica into a one-party dictatorship. So let us all ask ourselves, in whose interests have the fights to steal elections been waged in the past? Has it redounded to the benefit of the farmers or the fishermen, the local contractors, the local equipment owners and operators and seal Dominicans, the public officers, the young entrepreneurs, or for young people on the block that were simply relegated to smoking cannabis, but not to gain the wealth from processing the essential medicinal oils and other byproducts from the plants? Is there an effort now underway to buy preordained results of the electoral reform consultations for some $650,000? Money that could well have been productively invested in plants, in fertilizer, in markets, and so on for farmers' produce. Our discussion tonight, therefore, will focus on getting our people to understand and to see that it is people who will benefit from fair and fair elections. As you can see, politicians now have a tendency and a very bad habit of just working for themselves and for just a select few of their chosen close friends. But you must make it clear to them by your very firm actions that they must work for you, the people, otherwise you will vote them out of office. You need to make that clear to them, you, the people. As we focus on the important issues of residency and who should have the right to select a parliamentary representative, let us remember that a PAL rep is selected specifically for a period of 5 years to speak on behalf of the people living in one specific constituency. Nobody is disenfranchised by that PAL rep if they do not reside in that specific constituency. Nor the strength of any government depends on the independence of parliamentarians to work directly for the improvement of the lives of their constituents resident in their constituencies. Once parliamentarians begin to feel that their power comes from the people living abroad, who are paid to come down and vote for them to win, they will likely not feel any commitment to work diligently for those persons who are locally resident in their constituencies. And be mindful also that free and fair elections and democracy is beyond partisanship. It is a cause of nation building beyond partisan politics. It's about the quality of our sincerity to regain the soul of our nation. Too many stakeholders are still sitting back and never sharing their views and wisdom or wealth in organized philanthropic or voluntary efforts. Sitting on the fence or hiding in the shadows is no longer an option. Most Dominicans believe that now is the time for informed, unified action by the masses of the people who possess what is known as the people power. My distinguished guests, former Prime Minister Edison James, Justice Dr. Irving Andre, Ms. Maslin Edwards, will share their views on these issues and more and help us decide on actions we must take on the way forward to secure free and fair elections that will give us good, accountable, and transparent government and return us to the path of democracy, take Dominica from crisis to recovery, and restore the respect of the international community. I'm sure my guests will speak about the consequences of having tainted elections, as referenced by the CCG, that result in weak parliaments, bad governance, and undue foreign influence. I hope they will also speak to Dominica's future economic prospects on the good governance arising out of free and fair elections and level playing field. So we all look forward to securing good governance that will stop the hemorrhage in our economy, take it from crisis recovery, lift the people out of poverty and mendicancy, and improve their daily lives and livelihoods. And meantime, my guests and you, our cherished listeners and callers, will make the case for the urgency of arriving in a consensus now on the way forward for our nature island and move ahead to accomplish that objective with one crystal clear voice. So wherever you are in Dominica, in the region, and globally, tune in, call in, join the conversation. Let the answers to your questions be part of the solutions on this big station. A huge shout out, hugs, much love, appreciation, a big thank you to our healthcare providers, frontline workers, police, fire officers, teachers, doctors, nurses, and other public and private sector patriots. We welcome every Dominican, every friend of Dominica to the Global View on Q. We embrace you wherever you are tonight, in every nook and cranny, in every village, in every community in Dominica, in the region, and globally. Thank you, Sherwin, as usual, for keeping us on the air. Thank you, Lambi. On the console, Q95 tonight, directing the traffic. We will take your calls a little later on. As you know, the people's voice is always a priority. Please call us a little later. So let's get started. And I want to go to, first of all, to former Prime Minister Edison Chenfield James to examine the state of Dominica's electoral and campaign finance reform and regulations efforts. So we'll look at 6 or 7 critical electoral reform issues concerned. Look at the state of preparedness of Dominica's parliamentarians and the state of preparedness of the Speaker of the House to engage in a free and fair, equitable, substantive debate, and especially with respect to the anticipated debates of the bills with respect to electoral and campaign finance reform laws and regulations that must be tabled in the Parliament for passage into laws, and especially, essentially, the way forward for Dominica's economy and society and culture in a post-Roosevelt Skerrit regime. Mr. Edison Chenfield James, I'm going to give you the first word, but there is something that I wanted to do. I don't know if I should do it now. You'll tell me if I should maybe try to do it after you get started. But there is an audio clip that we've been hearing. We've heard for quite some time, and some people have been raising all kind of issues about the question of overseas vote, and you can pay passages for people and let them come down, and it is not really bribery and treating. And there's so many cases that prove that. And one gentleman called and say, if you pay for people and it's not conditional, then you don't have a problem. It's not conditional that they must vote for it, not as a problem. But I have a little clip that I wanted to share with you and our audience tonight, Mr. James. Would you like me to ask Lambi to run that now before you start, so you'll be able to comment on it when you speak?
Sheridan, with respect, you've given me some indication as to what it is, so let's take it in a little later at the appropriate time.
All right. Well, I will take it. I will take it after you. So
I'll give you.
Okay. All right. Very
okay.
Good.
All right. Thank you very much, Sheridan. And let me say good evening to you and good evening to your viewers and listeners, our fellow guests, Marceline. Marceline, when last you were Congal? When last you made a Congal?
I was there when.
Okay. I'll talk to you later. Sheridan, you see me talk with the glass cocoa give the woman the talk English give me.
Me de for May first.
Okay, me de for May first. Okay. Well, good to see you. Good to see you.
And good to see you.
Lambi, good to see you as well. And Sherwin, I haven't seen you, but I understand you're there. Mr. Gregoire, you've given me a task there. I don't know whether and to what extent I can really fulfill it.
Let me just ask Marceline. Maybe she can mute her mic so that it doesn't no feedback comes to you as you speak. Go right ahead.
Okay. So I don't know whether I can fulfill it in the way you've directed, but I just want to sort of set the the parameters within which I will seek to make my contribution this evening, not, of course, ignoring the more specific pointers that you've given. Our constitution dictates or asserts that we believe as Dominicans in a democratic society, a society within which we respect the rule of law, and we are committed to fundamental rights and freedoms, the fundamental rights and freedoms of all citizens. At the core of these beliefs and understandings and agreements and assertions, at the core would be free and fair elections. Free and fair elections, a process through which the people elect representatives to the parliament, recognizing that it is those representatives who are largely going to make decisions on their behalf. Let me see if I can get this out here. That representatives are going to make decisions on their behalf. The people have the unfettered right to change those representatives at the appropriate time in accordance with the provisions of any law, and to change the group which rules the country, and change the governments periodically. And they would seek to do those things, to make changes as appropriate, if they are satisfied, if they're not satisfied that the government, the group of people whom they've elected, that group is managing the country properly. Managing the country properly would mean the timely and appropriate delivery of goods and services for the benefit of the people, creating opportunities for meaningful employment, bringing about economic development to the benefit of the people, to create a society in which social justice is at its core, transparency is part of its modus operandi, and to recognize and appreciate and respect the Constitution, which, according to the current AG, Attorney General, the Constitution is what governs us, and we all agree that. We recognize there are three arms of government: the executive, essentially the cabinet, the legislature, and the judiciary. As it is in Dominica, one would essentially say that the executive and the legislature are almost one and the same. When you have a situation in which you have what we say 21 elected representatives, although we know out of those 21 so-called elected, a number of them were just nominated. Nobody voted for them. I think it's the first time, only time in our history that we've had a prime minister and a minister of finance who on election day, nobody voted for them, which is an interesting dynamic. But we also have in that mix of the group that governs us, the president. And I think you mentioned the president, and today I understand there was a first step in the process of electing a new president. The president, we are told, the Constitution provides that executive authority rests with the president being someone who has the responsibility to unite the country. So as you talk about the presidency today, Sheridan, we look forward to a president that is, as I said, a unifying force, a unifying factor. I think it was unfortunate that the Prime Minister, Mr. Skerritt, found it necessary to insert what many believe was an element of divisiveness in the matter of the presidency when he spoke today, and talking about how unfortunate it was that the leader of the opposition did not find it possible to agree with his suggested nominee for the office of president. After all, the Constitution allows for the leader of the opposition not to agree. And you get a sense there that Mr. Skerritt was introducing a kind of conflict between men and women, those who don't support women, those who don't support the Kalinago, trying to instill some kind of, as I said, divisiveness between the Kalinago people and the non-Kalinago people, which is unfortunate. But then this is a prime minister who has shown an element of contempt for the people, the greatest of which, by way of demonstration, was his declaration that no law, no constitution will prevent him from doing what he wants to do, calling his citizens, the fellow Dominicans traitors, advising people to pour hot water on them, the question of comments that suggest that we have no problem with kidnapping our citizens and kidnapping other people, other citizens of other countries, and the whole question of political persecution. We have a situation right now where about 5 people, prominent people in the opposition, are trekking to the courts on a regular basis on some trumped-up government-directed charges, and also the question of accountability to the people, the lack thereof of accountability to the people. We still, people are still rightfully abhorred by the fact that the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance until a few months ago refuses to clearly, unequivocally advise the people of Dominica of the whereabouts of what has been calculated to be some $7.9 billion of our money that is missing. But that shows, again, a level of contempt for the people. I don't have to tell you anything.
Well, Mr. James, let me, before you move on from the presidency thing there, Mr. Skerritt's words about women and the Kalinago people, isn't it a fact that some years ago, Mrs. Dorothy Levy, the very prominent person in our society, an outstanding principal, a woman of very high repute, wasn't she nominated or named to be president?
Well, there lies the hypocrisy of Mr. Skerritt's apparent commitment and endearment to women being holding the presidency. He gloats about the first woman president and so on, but he had the opportunity to have allowed, to have supported and voted for a president, a female president some time ago, Mrs. Levy. You know, and no one in this country would say that she wasn't qualified, but he voted against her. So this hypocrisy about first woman that he's touting is just what it is, hypocrisy. And we will see later that also this special about this thing about Chris Kalinago woman and suggesting that people are against Kalinago or the woman because she's Kalinago, then that lie will probably come to haunt him sometime later. And so the question of our country and our resources being under foreign control, something which is clearly at the feet of the Prime Minister and his ruling administration. But the ultimate sanction, Sheridan, that is available to the people in all this is the ability to, through the electoral process, to change government. And it's interesting that throughout the Caribbean, since 2000, the only country which has not changed, has not made a change with respect to the group of people governing it, is Dominica. For all the Caribbean countries, many of them have changed twice, 3 times, 4 times, twice. We have never changed the group of people. And that cannot happen. That is not normal, natural, because it's not as though the government is performing. It is the former senior minister and current cabinet consultant, Reggie Ostry, who told us that Dominica is last in everything. We are behind in everything. So what it is then that is bringing about this situation where we in Dominica seem not to be able to change government? And I would suggest it is to do with the fact that this electoral process has been significantly and severely contaminated by the current regime. So that as we seek to restore health or wealth or strength, it is necessary for us to have meaningful electoral reform. And, there is a relationship between electoral reform in Dominica now and the management of the country. Because the ruling party has decided that come what may, it will do everything within its power to ensure that the people of Dominica cannot and will not engage in free and fair election. So there's that resistance. And why is there that resistance? It is just to maintain the status quo. And we all know the notorious directive. I won't even call it an email. The notorious directive by Tony Astafel to Mr. Skerritt that electoral reform, as determined by the constitutionally authorized body to oversee the question of registration and conduct of elections, that body, which took a decision within the ambit of its authority, was frustrated. And we have since 2008 not been able to achieve that most desirable outcome of proper and effective electoral reform. So we are being told now, as we've looked at those consultations, about the sanctity of the vote, and the disenfranchisement, and we must not disenfranchise people who are on the list, particularly the people who are on the diaspora. It is the same group of people who told us some years ago with a lot of scorn and contempt that the diasporans were trying to control this country or run this country by remote control, and they were not going to allow it. All of a sudden, they love the diaspora to death. You understand? That level of hypocrisy is really to be frowned upon. And so I continue to say that it is not a question of anybody preventing people from the diaspora from qualifying to vote. It is our constitution. And I said to you, I agree with the AG when he said it's the constitution which controls us. So this modus operandi of the ruling administration of getting involved in bribery and their love for this diaspora group is simply a question of them seeing this group of people out in the diaspora who have little or no interest in how the country is run after an election, because the running of the country, the mismanagement of the country does not affect them on a daily basis. It doesn't affect them. We love our people. I have my daughter out in the diaspora, two daughters out in the diaspora. I have brothers and sisters and so out in the diaspora. So it is a question, and we need to get this right. This love for the diaspora, this sanctity of the vote, has nothing else to do with except that this is a pool of people there that this Labour Party grouping sees as a source of contaminating the electoral process and undermining the wishes of the people who are resident in Dominica. So when we say that electoral reform must involve the question of elimination, the elimination of bribery, as seen by the payment of the airfares of people to come to Dominica to vote. When we say that that is bribery, it is bribery. And we get people getting involved in telling us that the unconditional payment of fares is not bribery. And they tell us that their payment of fares to people to come here is unconditional. That is where you can play the tape, tape you have, Mr. Gregoire.
Well, if you'd like me to do that, I can ask Lambi. I think he has it somewhere queued up on the console. I can ask Lambi to run that clip for us and let us maybe hear some of that evidence ourselves.
Right, evidence that they are in fact bringing people here on condition that they're going to vote for the Labour Party. Is it ready?
Yes, Lambi, would you run the clip, please? So it looks like Lambi's just getting...
Oh.
Hi, Mr. LeBlanc.
Oh, that's a great woman.
Hi, this is Janet. You remember?
I hope you understand, because, I mean, boy, you don't have to be so desperate.
I know.
But they know who they dealing with. They know. Since in Dominica, them call I am they know who they dealing with.
Yeah, Henderson knows I'm
That's why I can get that.
I said Henderson knows me, and he knows I'm labor all the way. So
Yeah. Well, I didn't know. No, you have to understand because them guys calling. You don't be trying to get my tongue, But okay, I have a pen and paper now.
Okay, great. So, what do you need from me?
Hold on.
Sure.
Let me add a paper there with some guidelines what to ask. But okay, you just wait. Let me see. U.S. passport, right?
No, I got a Dominican passport.
You don't have a U.S.
No, I have a Dominican passport.
Okay. That's the passport you'll be traveling with, the Dominican one.
Yes, I'm giving you the Dominican information. That's what I have now.
Yeah, but listen, that is what you'll be traveling with.
Yeah. My Dominican.
Because if you have a U.S. passport, you have to travel with the U.S. passport,
I have a green card. I'm
not a U.S. passport. That's why I asked.
Yeah,
because some people have the U.S. passport and give me Dominica information, Dominica passport.
No, I'm traveling around.
If you have a U.S. passport, no, I'm just explaining. If you have a U.S. passport, you have to travel the U.S. passport.
Okay.
Passport number.
It's R.
Yeah.
00.
00.
292.
You're breaking up.
292.
You're breaking up.
You hear me clearly now?
R002 what?
29264.
29264. You're breaking up. Let me move. Maybe I'm in the room. Let me move to another place of the house to see. 000. No, 2 zeros. 00.
Right. R00292.
Yeah, hold on. 292. Yes, I have that.
64.
64.
Yeah.
Right. Where was it issued? Roseau. Okay, Roseau. But what date it was issued?
Hold on, let me check here.
Yeah, and the date it expire?
It's the 14th of June, 2007.
2007. I issued it.
Issued,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, expiry date.
13th of June. Hold on, let me check.
13th June.
2017.
Take your time.
2017. Yeah.
Take your time. The flight not leaving you down. Take your time.
Oh my.
Take your time.
I'm really anxious to get home.
What year? June 13th?
2017.
2017.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, date of birth.
It's the 25th of April, 1969.
April 21st?
25th of April.
25th, 5, like a 5.
5.
25.
25. 25th of April, 1959.
1959. 25th of April.
Yeah.
Right, 1959. And St. Joseph.
Yeah.
And what airport you'd like to leave from?
Oh, well, I live in Miramar, Florida. So,
also it's
Fort Lauderdale.
Hollywood,
Fort Lauderdale. Yeah, Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, Hollywood. Okay, Hollywood. And what's the dates you want to travel?
Well, the election's on the 8th, right?
8th.
So, if I can probably travel on the 5th, that would be great. I won't get much time away, so, I'd like to return probably on the 11th or 10th, somewhere around there.
No, I'm not 10th. Because I was trying to leave on the 10th. No space on the 10th.
Well, anytime
so
around
11th?
that.
Before the 11th?
Yeah, the 11th is
right?
fine. Yeah.
Okay then.
I can't stay away too long.
I think that's it,
Is that all you need?
Oh, your phone number.
My phone number. Let me give you my number. Hold on.
Yes.
Do you need my email address? Are you gonna email me the
itinerary?
You can
email too. Yeah, email too.
Yeah. So it's J is in Janet.
J as in Janet.
Right. Pierre, Pierre.
C.
No, P as in Pierre. It's J, Pierre Louis.
P-I-R-E.
P-I-E.
P-I-E-R-E.
R-R-E.
R-I-E.
No, double R. P-I-E-R-R-E. Louis.
Okay.
Pierre Louis.
You know what? Text me that before we have any confusion here. Because you're breaking up and I don't know if it's...
Okay, I guess
text me.
the connection.
You can text it to me, right?
I should be, yeah, I'll text it to you.
Okay, I think that's all I need. And the phone number. What's the phone number?
Right, it's 917
917
310
310
3746.
3746. Oh boy, the name as it is on the passport. The name as it is on the passport.
Right, so that is Janet, Janet.
Janet, Janet.
Yes.
Okay.
Pierre, Pierre.
2 R's.
Yeah, double R.
Double R-I-E.
Pierre.
E. Okay.
Louis, Louis, Pierre Louis.
That, and you put a dash and then Louis?
No, it's one. It's joined.
One word?
One word.
It's joined. Okay. Louis now.
Right. Louis. Louo.
Louis. Louo.
No, Louis.
Louis.
Right. So my email address. Right. So
but
my
still email me. Email me that information so it will be like a cross check. Like.
What is your email?
I want to have everything correct.
No problem. What is your email address?
That's magic. Okay. That's magic. DATS.
DATS.
D like in dog.
Right. That's magic.
Dog.
AMAGIC.
Yeah, that's magic at hotmail.com.
Okay, I got that. So I'll send you an email on that now with all my information.
Yeah.
Okay, great
all
chatting with you, Michael. It was really a pleasure.
Meantime, hope to see you, Monica. Maybe I meet you somewhere. Maybe I know you. That name ring a bell, man. Michael. Janet. That name ring very.
Maybe when you see my face, you might remember me. But I love my Dominican and I want to get home to vote.
I would remember you. I speak St. Joseph all the time. Years ago.
Oh, I see. Okay, well, I'll send you that information now and we'll keep in contact via email, right?
Yeah, I'll send it up and then... But first of all, they have to check to see if you're registered on the visa.
Oh, okay, no problem.
Yeah, so I'm telling you straight, if you're not a registered voter, if you cannot vote, then no ticket will be allocated.
Oh, that's not a problem. I know I'm registered.
I'm just telling you.
Yeah, I know.
Because,
okay.
People believe, just...
I know you got your protocol.
You must be able to vote.
Yeah,
You must be able to vote to go now.
Okay, great.
In the meantime, take care of yourself.
You take care, yes. You too.
All right. And if you know any personal labor person, you have to make sure this labor, voting labor. If you in doubt, don't worry, tell them nothing.
I know.
If you know anyone, you can.
Yeah, I will. I will. If I
just give them my number.
Not a problem. Thank you, Michael.
If you have the slightest doubts, forget the idea.
I know. I don't have any doubts. I don't. Okay, you take care.
Anyone you know.
Okay, good night. Bye.
Okay, bye. Take care. Bye.
So, Mr. James, I don't know whether that helps.
So you see, Sheridan, if you have, when people talk about it's their supporters and it's unconditional and this sort of thing, that there's the lie there. That was Michael Pecker-Leblanc, okay, the agent for the Labour Party some years ago, telling you exactly what the arrangement is.
Well, what he said, just to remind you, is that he told her, if you know of anybody,
yes,
and if you have any doubt at all whether they'll vote for Labour,
yeah,
forget about it.
Yeah.
You must have
So
no doubt at all that they're going to
yeah.
vote.
I will leave it there for now by way of my first intervention. I know Marceline is anxious to say her piece, and I will come back later on some of the areas you actually raised and some of the issues I want to clarify. Thanks.
Yes, and thank you for that, Mr. James. I know that Martin will have quite a bit to talk about, the whole diaspora understanding there, and how it relates to this electoral reform process and all this business of disenfranchising people and who's eligible to vote and who's not. I'm hoping that Dr. Andrew will join us anytime. Where he is there now is a few hours difference in our time, so we can get himself sorted out there. But I just want to, before you come on, Martin, I wanted to reach out to all these folks on Facebook on YouTube or joining us now, and I'm looking forward to us looking at some of their comments and appreciating their observations. But Marcel, when you listen to that recording there, it has been around for a while, but I thought it would be useful to put it out there now, because I've listened to Dr. Donald Peters, and I've listened to some of the people talking about, if you pay people's tickets, it's not bribery and treating, and there's cases in court to demonstrate it. I think Dr. Andre put that to rest, but still I thought it would be good to bring the evidence to show. And the fact that this gentleman is saying to the lady, look for other people. But if you have any doubt at all that they're going to vote for this political party, forget about it. Don't even think about it. There must be no doubt in your mind. Is that a condition? He's saying that if you're not registered, that you cannot vote there is no point. It no make sense. In other words, that's the condition under which you will get it, because it's a ticket to the arranging for him to pay a passage to go down. Your thoughts, Marceline? You want to turn on your mic just to make sure we can hear you. Your mic is still off, so you might want to unmute it. Now you're on.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Go right ahead.
Well, a special good evening, Mr. G.
Good evening, Marceline.
Good evening to the Honorable Mr. Edison James. And hopefully Judge Andre, even if he's not on his listening, a special good evening to you, sir. Good evening, Lambi on the console. And good evening to the number of persons who have tuned in, either by radio or on Facebook Live. I've seen quite a number of people here on Facebook Live. A special good evening to you all. I am glad you all are here. And likewise, I am very happy that you invited me to the program this evening, Mr. G. I feel very honored and privileged to be sitting on this panel tonight in the presence of, such a noble and patriotic and distinguished son of the soil, Mr. the Honorable Edison James, who was our former Prime Minister, and of course, you, Mr. G. And that in itself speaks for, the number of Dominicans or the Dominicans from across every different spectrum who have the best interest of Dominica at heart and who are fighting for the soul of our motherland. And because Mr. James could have just been sitting quietly on his rocking chair, sipping his cup of tea, at his age, he could have just said, well, I'm retired, but he's out here tonight and we are here together fighting for country. But of course, it was on very short notice, Mr. G. But like a good soldier, I am always ready to speak up and advocate for my country of birth. Like the many Dominican diasporans who have stood for country, who have contributed to the barrel economy in the millions, who have subsidized and assisted financially our brothers and sisters at home, who are struggling to keep the electricity bill, the lights on at their homes, who are struggling to put food on their tables, who are struggling to pay the exorbitant cost of healthcare, who are struggling to meet the needs of their children. But despite all that I have mentioned, We, the Dominican diasporans who have made those contributions, we do not believe in imposing our will on our brothers and sisters at home. We understand our obligation and responsibilities to humanity and country. In the same manner, we understand love and patriotism. And so it is out of love for country and our brothers and sisters at home that we in the diaspora come together in various civic groups like the Adnexus Group, which is the Association of Dominicans in the Northeast USA. And that's comprised of the Dominican Cricket Club, the Know Your Culture Group, the North American Association for the Advancement of La Plaine, and there is the Northeast USA Wesley chapter, for instance, that proceeds that that hosts an annual dinner, and where it's an annual cultural gala, and of course those proceeds have been used for the donation of more than 20 sewing machines to Royal Globe Inc. to assist with education of women and young girls learning the craft of dressmaking in the quest for becoming economically independent. They have also provided pond liners to the Northern Aquaculture for the erection of a shrimp farm. And the Wesley Group itself has disbursed scholarships for students attending secondary schools in Wesley. And, they have also assisted students attending college. They have sponsored Christmas dinners for the elderly in the village of Wesley as well. And of course, there was also the Dominica Emerald Organization of New Jersey, the civic group that was very instrumental in organizing the Dominica Independence Church service that I was part of, and which was well known for bringing the Madame Wobjayet show to this part of North America, among other very important and highly recognized contributions. And that was before it became contaminated with politics, the dirty politics of the Labour Party. Now, these civic groups in the USA laid the foundation, the groundwork that served as a bridge that kept our culture alive. And us, we Dominican diasporans, super connected to Dominica, because there was no social media, there was no Facebook Live, there were no live broadcasts on YouTube, and no free WhatsApp calls and free videos. Those civic groups served as the amalgam that kept Dominican diasporans united until the divisiveness of the Labour Party regime was injected into the souls of those groups. The first well-known and major disenfranchisement we Dominican diasporans had was when Mr. Skerritt visited the USA and had a meeting with the Dominican diasporans who were supporting his voting fraud. We were completely left out of the meeting, being told that the meeting was not for every one of us. It was not for everybody. Imagine how we felt being on a group, breaking our backs, doing everything legal within the parameters of raising funds for Dominica, and some executive members of the same group are disinvited because you happen to be from a village that Labour Party did not win. So I am saying all of this to say how the disenfranchisement came in, and how this Labour Party regime destroyed the unity among diasporans in the US. Because at that point in time, when all of those groups, all our groups were functioning, we did not see that dirty red politics. There was nothing about, going home to vote and disenfranchising Dominicans. So all of that was happening then. And as I said, there was no, it was difficult to even, really know what exactly was going on in Dominica, because, as I said, the advent of social media, it came in just recently, a few years ago. So today, when Dominicans When Dominica has become a nation of social media and everything is brought live, we are better informed. We see the major lack in every sector in Dominica. We see the compromised government institutions and the severity of which our brothers and sisters at home are affected. We see the number of deaths of young people, be it by accidents, be it by sickness or murder. We see the number of funerals of so many young people brought live by MO News. A number of those deaths were preventable deaths. Why preventable? Because the diasporan doctor from La Pointe, who was disenfranchised by not being given his license to practice in Dominica. This doctor, Dale Dangaben, would have raised the many Lazaruses who were left to languish and die at the hospital. After every hurricane devastation in Dominica, the diaspora groups came together. We came together to support our brothers and sisters back home. We did it out of love. There is this group, and it is called, the diaspora group is Rebuild Dominica. I know that group has submitted proposals after proposals to be part of the rebuilding process in Dominica. And each and every time those proposals and requests were submitted, they were turned down by the government. A government that will not engage, nor include diasporans in the building process of the country when the opportunities present themselves, cannot speak of disenfranchisement of diasporans. A government that will not give highly qualified and efficient Dominican diasporans the approvals to save the lives of Dominicans at home with the most needed medical services and expertise cannot speak about disenfranchisement of diasporans. When they have to watch helplessly Dominicans lose their lives out of malpractice, out of negligence, and a completely broken healthcare system. Given the oath they have taken as healthcare professionals to save lives, that is the worst form of disenfranchisement a government can inflict on its citizens or the diasporans that they consider to be disenfranchised by not going to elect a corrupt government on the backs of Dominicans. Now, this of what is happening in Dominica, where they must import those votes to be elected into office. It is not because they want to enfranchise diasporans. It is because they want to keep themselves in office. We just heard the tape that was played. Now, I heard that tape played quite a few years ago, but I honestly did not sit and listen to that tape and really digested what was being said on that tape. But with these new proposals that are being proposed, and they call it electoral modernization, and we see what they are trying to do is to make legal what this man was saying in the video being interviewed by that young lady. Now, this man did not know whether this person clearly does not even have a Dominican accent. So that means that person has been living abroad from Dominicana, or is probably not a Dominican. But here is what he's saying. You must be a laborite. You must be a laborite. And if you have the slightest doubt that persons that you're trying to recruit for this agent is not a laborite, then do not recommend them. So you see where the bribery is coming right down our doorsteps. And with, when every time you go to Dominica, he spoke about the American passport. She said she had an American passport. She did not say she had a Dominican passport. She said she had an American passport. He asked
No,
for,
no, I think she said she had a Dominican passport.
she said she had a Dominican passport.
Yeah, I think that's what she said. Yeah, she said she had a green card, not a U.S. passport. She had a Dominican passport.
Or she had a green card and she did not, and she had, okay. Okay, well, thank you. She said she had a green card. Now, with the green card, you have to be domiciled. You have to be resident in the United States. You cannot be living outside of Dominica on a green card. Now, when you are issued that green card for you to live in the US, it says a permanent resident green card. It's a permanent resident green card. What does permanent means? Can you be living in two places at the same time? Can you be a permanent resident in America and a permanent resident in Dominica? Now, after you go through the process of having the green card, then you're allowed. Well, you apply for your citizenship, and it takes a process. You don't just get a green card and then you get citizenship. You get a green card, and within 3 to 5 years, you can apply for citizenship. Within let's say 5 years, you get that citizenship. But then when you get that citizenship, you took that oath. You took that oath to be an American citizen. You applied out of your own free will. No one forced you to become an American citizen. No one forced you to take up new sovereignty, to swear against your country, to state that if Dominica and America wind up in a conflict, no one put a rope to your neck and pushed you to that interview and said that I will take up arms against your country. You did it on your own volition. When you go to Dominica, this is what they give you: non-national. You see that? So the immigration is saying you are non-national. You are a non-national. Okay? This was what they gave me the last time, a non-national. And every time I go into Dominica, my passport is stamped vacation. So how are you a citizen when the immigration is saying one thing? The immigration sees you as a non-national, but to vote in Dominica, you are suddenly a national. Now, if this government was about genuine elections and about democracy, where the elections were not stolen, if this country was a country that followed the constitution of the land, they would have done everything in their power to ensure that people do not come in to sabotage the elections in Dominica. Because the information, every time you go into the country and you leave the country, there's a record in the immigration. They would have known that the number of persons who came in on American passports who were non-nationals, they themselves stamped them as non-nationals, and who voted in the elections. Because I am sure if that was happening in the US, they would have rounded up all the Dominican diasporans who went home to sabotage those people's elections. They would have rounded them up. And they know for a fact, well, they cannot do that. Now, they have a system when they were mobilizing the people to go home. The person who spoke in the video, he's an agent. There were many agents like that same very man who would call to recruit persons to go home. And in certain areas where the vote was not needed, they would say things like, "Oh, we don't need for that area. We have enough for that area. What we need is votes for St. Joseph. Votes for St. Joseph." So they would they would have the number of votes or persons that they have to recruit to for different areas, and they would be mobilizing and giving tickets to the number of votes. Let's say St. Joseph needs about 200 voters. They would mobilize persons to go home in the St. Joseph area. Or if it's in the Maho area, they would mobilize the number of persons that was needed in the Maho area. And those very same organizers, they were not doing it for free. They were not doing it for free. They all were paid. They all were paid like $10,000. When they went to Dominica, they got their monies in the brown paper bags. They saved some of the money. They saved half in Dominica, and they came back to the US with the other half. And they know for a fact that what they were doing was helping to sabotage Dominica's elections. So when we see Dominica has totally fallen apart, we see our people dying. And you want to tell us that is the diasporans here who are disenfranchised? When we have the hospitals, so many hospitals we can go to. Within the area where I live, there are about 5 or 6 hospitals within a 15, 20 minutes drive that I can go in the event I were to get sick and I have to check in at a hospital. And Dominica has one main hospital, and my medicine cabinet in my bathroom is more equipped than the hospital in Dominica. And if that is not a problem, I don't know what else is.
I want to ask you to stick a pin here a little bit, because I suspect there might be people out there in the diaspora who have been listening to us, listening to that tape that reminds them of what transpired in that transaction there, and listening to you talking about this. I'm pretty sure there's people who might want to call in and give their views and express their views and make some comments and maybe tell us their personal experiences with those things. So, and because we know we have a certain time limit there, I wanted to ask Lambi, give the people the telephone numbers. I'll come back to you a little bit later, Master. I know you have a lot more to talk about. I'll ask Lambi to give out the telephone numbers, and then maybe we'll go to Mr. James while we wait for the calls. And then Lambi, Lambi will be able to interrupt us at any time. And
are as follow: 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257. The international or overseas number is 305-432-9624. We'll pass it back to you, Mr. G.
Yes, and thank you a lot for that, Lambi. Mr. James, I mean, you reflected on some of what Maslin has just said. You listen to that tip, and it really is a stark reminder of the process. It's a transactional thing, because we know there's probably 150,000 Dominicans out there, right? But if you only bring in 3,000, 4,000 people between North America and Europe and the Caribbean and so on, and you only pay for those people's passages and you give them pocket change, come in and vote in specific constituencies where they don't live, and which is against the law, of course. Does it mean, why are you disenfranchising all the rest of those people? Let's take a call, Lambi.
Good evening, caller. Thanks for joining us. Please go ahead with your call.
Yes, good evening. When I listen to people like Donald Peters, it gets me sick in the stomach. I sat in that mixed school with Donald Peters, Sheridan, Gregoire, Bruce Richards, and all the different guys. Having a doctorate is excellent, it's good. But our people, the older people in Dominica, always tell you that education without common sense is like having no education at all. So he's a complete idiot when I hear what he had to say. And it's a shame, a real shame. And another thing, it is about time that most of you on the radio station and Dominicans on the whole to realize that Dominica is a democratic country only on paper. Right now, Dominica is a full-fledged communist country. I look at something in BNO what day it was. We have some teachers giving some teacher something, and there are 2 flags, Dominica flag and the Chinese flag. What kind of crap is that? A hospital's named Dominica Friendship Hospital. If they give you a couple dollars to fix your hospital, you have to name the hospital after them. They give you a couple dollars to fix a bridge You have to name the bridge after them. Just now, Dominicans will be told they have to speak Chinese. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And we know that the Chinese are now assisting with construction of some schools. I don't know what that portends for the future of our education system. Mr. James, maybe you might be able to guide us on that. But let me just, as I have the mic, let me just say this. I have one or two people who have sent me some notes there. One person said to me earlier, each voter should be given an identification number, which will correspond to the voter master list. Only the Labour Party knows the election date ahead of time, and they purchase all available airline tickets for their voters, taking away the ability of non-voters to get seats to come in. And and another one, which is in a democracy, voters select their representatives. Communists are the ones who select their voters. Mr. James, any thoughts on this and any of this and any other thoughts you wanted to express at this time?
Yes, Sheridan. As I heard Marceline talk about the healthcare situation available to her in the United States where she lives, and as we talked earlier about our disappearing or $7.9 billion which have disappeared, and for which the former Minister of Finance, now Prime Minister, Minister of Finance now, none of them has been able to give an explanation as to the whereabouts of our money, except to remind ourselves that Mr. Skerritt a few years ago confirmed that if a certain amount of money had been put into the account, our budget would have been so much more. So we have to say, in the absence of any solid, credible, how you might say that, refuting by Mr. Skerritt of the figures that have been thrown out there, that we have $7.9 billion somewhere out there. That is money that is due to us, that we do not have control over. And when we reflect on the EU's comments the other day, its guidelines, when it indicated that one of its guidelines with respect to the CBI program would be that all monies generated from the CBI should go to the country from which these monies have been generated. And you reflect that of the 5 OECS CBI operating countries, Dominica is the only country where we have been, only one of these countries where we've been having discussions and talk about monies generated by the CBI not coming into our coffers. So we need to pay attention to that. So we have the health that Martin talked about, we have our wealth, and then we have our strength. So we have to work to restore the health, the wealth, and the strength of this country. A strength that was reflected in the fact that we, by the sweat of our brows, earned a living for ourselves. We used the water, we used the soil, we used the sun, light, and we used our skills to produce goods that we were able to sell, and we were able to generate revenue for the country. Nowadays, we don't have that. In fact, the government officially told us that there's nothing else that we can depend on to look after our livelihood other than selling passports. You remember the notorious, what is now the notorious adage, if not CBI what? And interestingly, that was actually repeated by the president, the outgoing president, sitting in the speaker's chair in the parliament. So we need to work as a country to restore our health, our wealth, and our strength. But we will not succeed in doing that if we do not have, and we cannot bring about, effective electoral reform. And again, I think Marceline mentioned the fact that these people, these agents, as one of those we heard earlier, they are being paid.
Can I just interrupt you 1 second? I think Lamb is desperately trying to reach us to take a call.
Good evening, caller. Please go ahead with your call.
Dear Lambi, good evening. Mr. G, good evening.
Good evening, how are you doing?
James and Marceline, good evening.
Good evening.
You know, Mr. G, the hurtful thing about that whole fraudulent way Roosevelt Skerritt have been stealing election all the time is by using the people's money. The passport money belongs to Dominicans. It's every Dominican money. He's using that money to bring in those people that disqualify, because The Labour Party never sell a chicken. They don't sell a kubuli. They never raise fund and sell a Heineken. All this money, millions of dollars, is the people's money, Mr. G. And then during the Palace of Confrontation, they're talking about, oh, we want government to sponsor political parties, give political parties money to run the campaign. I never heard the Freedom Party say that. I never heard UWP ask for any money to finance the campaign. And Roosevelt Sheridan Dominican money is his own, Mr. G. And a lot of people don't think about that. That is why we cannot supply the hospital. Nobody cannot get a raise. Even when the court have been ruling for him to pay certain individuals the money by a court judgment. He come to Parliament and tell them ask Parliament for money to pay the individual, and up to now, he haven't even have got no money. That is why when this problem is that G. But another thing I want to say real quick is that I never heard nobody talk about it, and that is a Freedom Information Act, a Public Information Act. Because to have a good and fair and credible election, you need good information. So if the people have good information, they can make good decisions. And I think that I never hear anybody talk about it, but it's important that we have the Freedom of Information Act so we could know how much money Dominica has, how much money they used to campaign. All these things the people need to know so they could make their own decision as to who best to represent them. Thank you so much.
And thank you very much for that. Mr. James, as I listened to that was the famous Bob Marley. As I listened to him there mentioning those things about the Freedom Information Act, let us also bear in mind that there has been great resistance to the whole question of campaign finance, a cap on campaign finance, and identifying the source of finance. And a lot of resistance to the question of conducting audits after the election period in order to ensure that this money was not coming from dark spaces and that this money was not coming abundance to influence the decisions of the government that comes out of that election, fully funded by this dark money. So but before I go back to you, let me just take another call from Lambi.
Good evening, caller. Please go ahead with your call.
Gentlemen, good evening, and good evening to you, Maslin.
Good evening.
Yeah.
I must say that, sir, that what Maslin, Mr. Edwards is talking about is 100% truth about these agents whom you would contact, and if you are not of the constituency that is not fully Labourite, they will tell you definitely that we don't need people. I can refer to that to myself. I called one of the agents trying to obtain a ticket sometime before the election, before the 2019. And I was told, oh, we don't need people there. I know definitely they didn't need people in that constituency because that constituency is a stronghold of the Labour Party. But I was trying him, and he did say that, oh, we don't need people here. Of course, this was to tell you that the people that they were recruiting were people that were not of strongholds of the Labour Party. And also one of the questions I never heard anybody put to Roosevelt Sheridan direct was as to who were the people who were coming down to vote. The people that they were recruiting in St. Thomas and St. Croix and everywhere else and New Jersey, who were they coming down to vote for? Was it the United Workers' Party or the Freedom Party or the Labour Party? I was expecting someone to put that question direct to Sheridan during the consultation, because that would have been a vital question for him to answer directly. Of course, we all know that they were coming down to vote for the Labour Party. Their passages were being paid by the Labour Party to come down and vote for the Labour Party, and he cannot deny that. You know, so when you're talking about fraud and otherwise about election and people are different one side, it should be that the people are coming down to vote. They're coming down to vote for the Labour Party, and their passages are being paid for by the Labour Party to come down and vote for the Labour Party. You know. Also, I want to get back to this consultation, and something that I got angry about during the consultation. A guy who, I will say it again, who described himself as credit union. I can't remember his name, and he said that the people of the diaspora who are sending their money down, they will accept it. Of course, there are many people who are sending their money down to Dominica. They are running away from the taxes of the United States, so they're sending their money down to save in the credit unions, whereby they are showing the United States that they have no money, no bank account, so they can go to the pantry, they can go to the other free services that were available for the United States people and send the barrels down of the pantry ingredients to Dominica. Then they're boasting, we contribute financially, we contribute with barrels, we contribute with this to Dominica. But of course, we all know that their contribution is based on probably just trying to avoid their taxes being paid in the United States. So thereby they're sending their money down to the credit unions. But maybe somebody should put the IRS on notice that the credit union is not complying to that form that they have to pull up, in order that they're saving internationally in foreign banks and having interest in foreign banks and not having to pay any interest or taxes here in the United States. Maybe somebody, because this is sometimes angering me, because I agree people have to take care of their families, but when the labor rights are boasting that, or the people are contributing, then they know why they're saying they're contributing. Anyway, there are so much issues to talk about, and especially issues concerning this Labour Party, that it may take 2 years and more to continue. So in order to just allow another caller, maybe I'll have to hang up and keep on listening. Have a good night, gentlemen.
And have a good night yourself.
Sheridan, I just wanted to continue. I was on there. On this question of money, the Labour Party in its in a document that was referred to in Sir Byron's report. Let me reference something here. They were saying in the budget, their budget for the 2018-2019 campaign, it is stated here, further, maximum effort will be made to recruit and transport overseas-based voters. Okay? And then it goes on to say that mobilization, it identifies the quantum, the amount of money that is allocated for that exercise. That is the mobilization of an air transportation for approximately 1,000 overseas voters, whose participation is vital to our success. Whose participation is vital for our success. So it is clear what they're doing, that they recruit these people, and we heard the tape from the recruiter there. They're recruiting these people, and they recognize those people and their involvement as being crucial to the success of the Labour Party. So let us not fool ourselves as to what they are doing. I think somebody mentioned the question of voter ID cards. I want our people to understand what happened with those consultations. The Labour Party, the government, has had over the years a multitude of reports, recommendations, consultancies, which speak to the question of electoral reform. They ignored all of them until they got the one from Sir Byron. And I've said on the record, I say again, Sir Byron identified in many cases what was required. And Mr. Skerritt, in a Zoom engagement with Mr. Byron in January 2023, an engagement which lasted from about 10:30 to 11:15 that morning, directed Mr. Byron away from some of the areas that Mr. Byron identified as being necessary with respect to this electorate. He directed him away from that, and Mr. Byron, I hope to his regret, buckled under Mr. Skerritt's direction. Mr. Skerritt then went to these consultations, and what they did was to, after they had the exercises at the State House, they decided that they needed to have voices put out there, so that, like in the parliament, people speak, there's a vote, those in favor, those against, the ayes have it. They have a collection of voices. The louder the voices, that is the determination as to who, where the vote is. So they got these people to come out there, starting with Nanton, who, when he learned that Lennox and I were at the Londonderry, decided to come out there to push the straight Labour Party propaganda. And from there they went on. In Marigot, we know that they gave 4 people a list of topics that they should raise. One of them was supposed to raise the topic of the vote of the list. Another one was supposed to raise the topic of campaign financing. Another one was supposed to raise a topic which he got lost in. He asked questions instead of raising the topic. And then the wrap-upper, if you like, was Greg Caressa. So we know that. And that's what they were doing, so that people, the observers in particular, would hear the number of people who are saying, we don't want ID card, we want national ID card. We don't want voter ID card, we want national ID card. We don't want campaign financing. I'm Sheridan, you mentioned the question of campaign financing. Mr. Skerritt made some comment about campaign. They were touting this thing about the party. There should be no government contribution to parties for campaigning. Nobody said that except Roosevelt Skerritt, you know. Okay? Nobody said that except Roosevelt Skerritt. And then Roosevelt Skerritt, when under pressure, he says that Mr. Byron, having made recommendations for campaign financing, and including the fact that you had to employ people to keep their accounts and so on, since the government would be by legislation imposing these requirements on the parties, then the government would have to make money available to the parties. Let me just say a few things about that. That is what in British dialect they say is balderdash, codswallop, bulla bulla. That is total and complete and utter nonsense. Codswallop, bulla bulla, and whatever else it is. Because we have a party structure, and in that structure we have a treasurer, we have an assistant treasurer. And every month we report on what we have, whether it's from a little, what they call it there, radiothon, or you hear the ladies selling food, or you hear a car raffle, and we've been raising our money. We've never heard of the Labour Party frying a bacon and Accra. Okay? So that's foolishness. And if you cannot have an organization where you have a treasurer or assistant treasurer doing your work, so he talks about this elaborate thing that will have to be done. That is just a means of trying to pour cold water on this whole question of campaign financing, because they do not want anything to do with campaign finance restrictions, because it will mean that they will be restricted in terms of using the CBI money. And they named the source of the money for their campaign. They named a CBI agent in the document that I just referred to. They named a CBI agent as one of the sources of their money. Okay, so that's what they're doing. So I want our people to understand that we all have an interest in informing ourselves. ID cards for voting. I heard the initial chairman of these consultations talking about, she said, once you're Dominican, whether you're economic citizen or not, you are a citizen. And she talked about the passport being a source of identification. Sheridan, you go to the polling station with your passport. Yes, you identify, the passport shows you're Sheridan Gregoire, your name is there, your photograph is there. But there's no such photograph on the sheet, on the register, which you're looking at to compare. Yes, this photograph on the passport is Sheridan Gregoire, but there's nothing to compare it with there. And the law, as it is now, is that once you present yourself to the polling station and you say you're Sheridan Gregoire, and there's a name there, Sheridan Gregoire, even if they know that you are not Sheridan Gregoire, they must give you the ballot and allow you to vote. What they do is that they ask you to take an oath, so that if tomorrow, or when tomorrow they find out that you lied, then they can take you to court. But by that time, the voting has been done and the wrong person is in place. And they know that. That is why they are fighting so hard against the ID card, the ID card for voting. Only the Electoral Commission can issue a card for voting. Only the Electoral Commission, and they can only issue a card for voting. They cannot issue a card as far as the law says now. They cannot issue a card for driving or for banking or anything. Only. So whether you call it a national ID card, is a voter card, but the Labour Party does not want that at all. So people understand that. And this diaspora thing, they do not let you, the diasporans, Basti and the diaspora, I'm urging you, do not allow the Labour Party to use you on this hypocritical run that they're on, that they love you so much. And that's why they don't want you to be disenfranchised and all this kind of. They're just using you to contaminate an electoral process and to keep us in poverty in this country.
Yes, thank you, Mr. James, for that. Lambi, don't interrupt us anytime. You want to take a call now? Let's take it.
Yes. Caller, please go ahead with your call.
Good evening, Dominica. Good evening, St. Joseph.
Yes.
I want to say I'm very disappointed in Skerrit. I disappointed in the whole government. Skerrit take us overseas for a bunch of fools. People with no sense, have a form of disrespect for us. Skerrit sell over 43,000 passports. And God knows how much billions of dollars that came out of those passports. We heard there is almost $8 billion out there. Skerrit take all that money and pass it in the hands of Arab. Go in the Middle East, sell passports to all crooks and criminals that will come and bomb America and bomb England. The House of Lords in England sells Skerrit and his government for them to create a tie with them with that passport on a CBI. Go and get all the CBI passport money and bring it to the treasury in Dominica. And what Skerrit has been doing has been playing tricks because he know the people in Dominica have turned their back and realized his government is a bunch of thieves. He is trying to go overseas to get voters to come down to Dominica to keep him in power, that he can escape. And this is why when they ask him, QFM journalists ask him, is there money outside in another account? He said no. Skerrit is bank and thieving Dominica money. And this is why Skerrit is going around the bush with Dominicans. It's not about because he cares about Dominicans overseas. Ask me how much policies did the Dominica Labour Party put in power for 23 years that benefiting people overseas. Only the labor rights who continue to persecute the people of Dominica because they want Dominicans to continue staying in poverty. Meanwhile, themselves in America in poverty, but they don't want the people in Dominica life to be better. They continue to go down and encourage Skerrit, but Skerrit only doing that because Skerrit has a lot to lose. But Skerrit does not tell us the truth about what happened in Great Britain. Skerrit is a corrupt government. This is why they're doing that. God bless Dominica. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And I want to just put a disclaimer on the question. The statement about the government is a bunch of thieves. Let's leave that out for now because we don't have the accurate information further that can stand in the court of law. But I have to agree with the caller that there's 46,000. I think he said 43,000, but I understand it was 46,000 passports that were sold within the last 7 years to people who were buying passports. And certainly the actions of the UK government make it clear that some of the persons to whom passports were sold, they really should not have been given passports if real due diligence had been conducted, because the British are saying that there are people who received those passports who are already on the watch list of the UK and that they were not allowed to enter the UK, and yet they now had a Dominica passport which allowed them to come in. We also know that many crooks and criminals have been given diplomatic passports, and we know that because some of them have gone to court, some of them have been imprisoned, and we know that this lady who's a Nigerian is now in the UK. I'm not sure whether she's been extradited to Nigeria, but we know that is a case that is pending. I know the government wants I understand that the British had filed some kind of a suit against her regards to trying to bribe somebody. This is our understanding. So this is not hearsay. We're not trying to make this up. I just want to deal with the facts as we have it. Before I go on to you, Master, let's take another call from Lambi.
Good evening, caller. Please go ahead.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. James
Good
and
evening.
Miss Edwards and Lambi, and the Q family,
Good evening.
Everybody blessed?
Yes.
Yes, everybody bless.
Amen. I would just like to refer Dr. Donald Peters to Article 25 of the U.S. Convention on Rights to Vote. So please read. I know that you are a diplomat, you are a doctorate, but maybe I'm forgot to read this one. Article 25 on the human rights to vote. This guy is lying to the Dominican people. Nobody can just come and vote in your country. They have to have the right to vote in your country, like staying in your country, legal citizenship, and working and living in your country. These guys are con artists, people of Dominica. Time to put these guys outside. Time is up for Sheridan is cabal. No words, my brother. No excuse cannot save you again. We had enough of you, sir. Yeah, it's our time now. Time to hit those people of Dominica and overthrow this guy immediately. Thank you very much.
Very much, caller. We believe in the force of democracy and the vote. Lambi, you want to take another call?
Yes, another caller. Caller, please go ahead.
Yes, this is for Mr. James. Mr. James, how long do you think Dominicans should keep talking? How long? How was Jericho liberated by our Heavenly Father? And I know you would know that. You grew up in the Methodist Church. Force was used. But there comes a time when you stop talking and you liberate your country with force, because God used force to liberate Jericho. Thank you.
Well, I would just say like Winston Churchill, Georgia is better than war. But there comes a time, I think there's a country and western, you don't have to fight. You don't have to fight to be a man. But then there's a time when you have to fight if you're a man. So I would say, you ask me how long will Dominicans keep talking? Let's say Georgia is better than war. But there's a time when countries have gone to war. So it means that at that time, a determination has been made that Georgia is not cutting it. So they resort to war. We prefer to bring about a change based on Georgia. The people will decide at some stage when their jaws are hurting and they can no longer Georgia, and they must do something else. Somebody mentioned earlier about we are not a democracy, we are a dictatorship. And as the person said that, I reflected on what I heard. I think it was Reggie Ostry say some years ago, that on 2 occasions, the full cabinet, took a decision to restore the official residence for the prime minister on 2 occasions. And Mr. Sheridan was out at the time, so he was not in the cabinet. And when he returned on these 2 occasions, he overturned the decision of the cabinet. That doesn't tell me that we have a democracy. And we heard Matthew Walters in his how many letters say to us basically that you have, even within the Labour Party, the party that is supposed to be the source from which the executive comes, that it is a one-man show. And we know that we have seen no indication that the constitutional provisions of the Labour Party have been followed. So it means from that source where the executive comes from, there's no democracy. And with respect to the executive, there seems to be no democracy either. And that it seems to be what they want to spread around the country by ensuring that there's no free and fair elections and one man continues to have his legacy protected. And the worst thing about it, Sheridan, is that this one man whom people will tell you they vote for, as I said, history is showing that first time in our history that the prime minister and the minister of finance in this country have not been elected. But these people are being controlled by 3 people. And at the top of that trio is a guy called Anthony Hayden. That we are being controlled by these guys. Sheridan, can you undertake to use your station in a more meaningful way as the mouthpiece to get Dominicans to understand that we must break away from this control that this one man has over a country? I saw a video the other day of a location out in Palm Tree in the Woodford Hill Wesley area. And I'm seeing a flag, a Chinese flag, flying over that piece of land. My understanding is that this is something that would happen in a country where the embassy of the country is located, and you fly your flag there. I do not understand, and somebody who knows these things better than me must tell me, what does it mean to have another country's flag flying over what is supposed to be a piece of our country, of our land? So that is what I would say, sir. How long will Dominicans keep talking? Georgia is better than war, but countries do fight war. And you do not have to fight to be a man, but there's a time when, if you're a man, you must fight.
Oh, just before we take another call from Lambi, I just want to make it clear, Mr. James. If, for example, one man handpicks the candidates for the constituencies, and if these candidates are not picked by the constituencies, they are not beholden to their constituencies. They're beholden to the man who picks them. And therefore, that is why you will get the cabinet of ministers will take a decision, as you indicated, and then this one man can come and override the decision of the cabinet because he is the one who handpicked these people, not their constituencies. If they had felt that they were beholden to their constituents, they would not allow him to override their decision because he could not remove them as MPs, because whenever a vote is called, they would be put back in as MPs, whether he likes it or not. But because he's the one handpicking them, that is the problem right there. He can override. And because the cabinet, there's hardly any distinction between the cabinet and the legislature. It means that it's the same people who are there passing the laws. Again, in the legislature, he's able to override, and the eyes will always have it. But really what that means is whatever he wants, he will have. But, you know, when we go back, Marcelin, to the whole question of this, you listen to that tape and the transactional way that discussion was going on. It was like a transaction. You have to be sure that you're going to vote for us. Otherwise, this thing, it don't make sense. Therefore, this is what has to happen. For you to get a ticket and for these people that you can refer to get a ticket, there must be no doubt that they're going to vote. Not only vote for the party, but they have to vote in specific constituencies where we need them. And we know for a fact that many of those people do not live there because they live in the United States or Canada or the USVI or somewhere, not in those constituencies. Master, you might want to add some comments to that.
Yes. Mr. James, you said that I should not allow the regime of Skerrit to fool me into thinking that I am being disenfranchised or they care about me. Mr. James, you know my dad very well, right, Mr. James?
Willie.
No, it's not Willie, it's Steve.
Oh, Steve.
Yes, and you have had several conversations, several discussions with him, so you know what he stands for. So that is the fiber I came from. That is the real metal I came from. So I'm not easily bought. I do not. Well,
I hope you're not bought at all.
I am not easily bought. I am not greedy. I am a person that I'm very contented with what I have. The little that I have, I'm very contented because I grew up learning contentment from my parents' home. So I will leave that here. Now, Mr. Gregoire, when I listened to that tape and knowing what diasporans have been doing over the past years, systematically that is. This is one of the main reasons why I broke away from the civic group that I had spent 7 years with on the executive. I broke away from that group because it was just contrary to everything. Everything they I could not understand why these people who were very instrumental in the group claimed that they were doing things for Dominica, but yet they were part of a system to keep Dominicans poor and mendicant. And I remembered a few years ago, and that is when Roosevelt's carrot used to come to America very often to have those meetings. He would come to the diaspora very, very often. And the group of sabotagers who would go home to sabotage Dominica's elections and their agents, they would meet all over in New York, in Miami, all over. And one of their concerns were their as to whether there would come a day when they would not be able to go home to place Roosevelt's carrot on the backs of Dominicans. And that is one of the things that he guaranteed them, is that as long as he is the prime minister, they will always be able to come home and vote in Dominica. And that would never happen where they would not be able to, where that would never happen where there would come a time when they would not be able to come home and vote in Dominica. So contrary to what the Constitution says, and this is what you call a serial breaker of the Constitution. This man does not care for law and order. This man does not care about the Constitution. And he does not care how much he disenfranchised Dominicans at home. Whereas those laws were put in place to protect the vote, the resident votes on the ground in Dominica. It was not put in place to protect the votes of diasporans who live under different governments, who live under foreign constitutions. It was meant for the Dominican people. And I don't understand if the Constitution gives a clear guideline as to when a voter should be removed on the list, why it should not be respected and honored.
Well, Martin, what I wanted to just say briefly on that, just to interject 1 second. I think when Dr. Donald Peters made that comment that if you were to remove names from the list, that you'd be breaching the international human rights of those people, I think Dr. Andre dealt with that thoroughly. He really called it arrant nonsense. That's what he called it. And I rather take his word for it. All right.
Okay.
Now, Marcelin, one of the things I wanted to guide you with is this. We have to remember when we're talking about 2,000-3,000 people whom a party may be paying their passage to come home to vote. Let us remember, these are people who really want to do what you're talking about there, to put this government on people's backs. But at the same time, there's probably another 140-something thousand Dominicans who are resident overseas who may not necessarily want to do that, and who may not want to receive a ticket and be bribed to go home and vote for a particular party in a particular constituency. So when we talk about the whole notion of disenfranchising people, if you're talking about just 3,000 people who are being targeted to vote in certain specific, what about the other 140,000 people who are out there who are not interested in that? So this is the point I'm making. So let us not give the impression as though, and these guys are, some of these people trying to get the impression as though when we talk, for example, about these things, we're targeting all diasporans, but really and truly, if we listen to that transaction in that discussion there, it was very specifically targeting people who are willing to be given a ticket to come home to vote in specific constituencies. And that is very important. So the overall diaspora, the people may not by and large be really interested in doing that. So we need to recognize that.
Yes, I do understand that. But when you listen to the consultation, you every one of them who spoke in the consultation, they voiced their sentiments as to why they should not be removed from the voters list. And they said simply I do not want to be removed. So what they have to understand is not up to their discretion. It is not up to the discretion. If the Constitution says something, that is where we have to uphold the Constitution. You cannot say, well, I don't want to, and then your name is just automatically going to remain on the list, you know. So it should be on the merits of what the Constitution says and not what people invest in Dominica. Because there are some who claim they have investments in Dominica, so they have a right to vote in Dominica. But who are the investors in Dominica? Who are the Dominican diasporan investors? Dominica's democracy hitmen and women. One of Skerritt's mules who live in New Jersey with a diplomatic passport and who was caught in Puerto Rico with blood money for elections. How many times did they come home to vote after the 20-30 years being here in the US on a green card and not being able to travel? Most Dominican diasporans fall in that category when they stayed here for over 20-30 years and could not go home to vote. So we have to follow the Constitution.
So yes, yes, we should. But remember, why we're here tonight is because we are at that juncture where we are looking at electoral reform, where a draft laws have already been presented, have been discussed over the last 3 weeks. And remember, in my opening remarks, I was putting a point across, and the question I was asking, should the government of Dominica establish, or should a committee be established? We call it an electoral reform oversight committee to finally review Sir Dennis Byron's submitted draft bills and regulations and to incorporate the recommendations made at various consultations where necessary and appropriate. And we're suggesting that the review oversight committee should comprise the Attorney General, representatives of all bona fide political parties, private sector organizations, the Bar Association, the church organizations like the Christian Council and the JAC, trade unions, youth organizations. And in fact, you should remove the control of that final review of that draft from the hands of the political directorate and put it in the hands of these people, these groups, as I put it. This is what has been suggested. I think it was suggested by the Dominica Business Forum, of which the political parties have been contributing, and the civic organizations have been contributing, and the church organizations have been contributing. I believe it is necessary at this stage. We have heard all the contributions from people who have been given talking points, but we've also heard some very substantial proposals being made that would put this thing right. And I'm suggesting that we need to ensure that this thing, the final review, the final putting of those provisions in there, should not be left to the politicians, should not be left to the political directorate. It should be left to the people's organizations. Yeah. That is one of the things that was recommended.
Yeah, Sheridan, I agree with you largely. In the final analysis, that body you're suggesting would have to deliver what it is they put together to the executive, so that the executive can take it after having presented it to the Electoral Commission and the Chief Elections Officer. The executive would then take it to the Parliament. So I agree with that. I just wanted to see on the question of Martin mentioned the Constitution. Yes, the whole question of who is entitled to vote is grounded in the Constitution. And there are probably 4 elements, 4 factors, 4 aspects of this qualification to vote. And it is found in the Constitution at section 33(2)(a) and B. It says every Commonwealth citizen, so that is the first qualification, you have to be a Commonwealth citizen. Every Commonwealth citizen of the age of 18, so you have to be 18, not less, or upwards, who possesses such qualifications relating to residence or domicile. And where? In Dominica. So you have to be a Commonwealth citizen. You have to be of the age of 18 or upwards. And you have to be resident or domicile. And that residence or domicile situation has to be in Dominica. And yes, even when you are so registered, and the side note to this section says election of representatives. So registration is the first step in the process of identifying, of being able to elect representatives. Is the first step. Okay. This notion that once you are elected, once you are registered, you cannot be removed, and so on. The law, and you see the Constitution says such qualifications as relating to residence or domicile in Dominica as Parliament will prescribe. Two things here: you have to be resident or domicile in Dominica. You cannot be resident or domicile anywhere. And the law that was passed relevant to this is in the Registration of Electors Act at Section 7, which says a person registered pursuant to this part shall remain registered unless and until his name is deleted from the register. So there's provision for the name to be deleted from the register, and deleted from the register because he has died, an objection to his registration has been allowed, he has been absent from Dominica for a period exceeding 5 years, or he has become disqualified for registration as an elector. Here, under this act or any other written law imposing disqualification for registration as an elector. This section, which talks about removing him if he has been absent from Dominica, is my considered view, and the view of many others, that provision there, he has been absent from Dominica for a period exceeding 5 years, is unconstitutional, because absence is not residence. Presence is not residence. Resident is defined. So once you are no longer resident in Dominica, your name should be removed from the register. And that is the Constitution, not any individual. Constitution that dictates that. Okay, so while I close up, Mr. Gregoire, let me just say that free and fair elections is what we're talking about. What Mr. Peters said, what Donald Peters said, is a reflection of a guy who is speaking to an audience of one, Mr. Sheridan. And when I see him, I'll tell him so, because we talk. Sheridan, you remember I put 3 goals against him when he was in goalkeeping for either Skin or Dublin, and I was goalkeeping for BJ. So I have that over him at that time. So that's what he said. There was nonsense, total nonsense. Okay, the question of human fundamental rights that he spoke about, that is provided for in our Constitution. Our Constitution is the one that tells us what are the fundamental rights and the freedoms that we have to adhere to. Okay, I would say, and Marcelin started off by recognizing that at my age I should be rocking in my rocking chair. I'd love to be doing that. But what I want is for the young people in our country to come forward. Don't put 1 foot forward and then 2 feet backwards. Come forward. Come ye forward, sons and daughters. Your country needs you. You cannot sit back and allow your country to be. How do you feel as a Dominican, 40 years, 30 years, 25 years, that your country is being controlled by one man, an Arab man somewhere, living somewhere we don't know? How do you feel? Young people, how do you feel? Mm-hmm. I feel bad, and I feel bad for you, because, I mean, people die young, old people live on for a while. But I think long after I'm gone, you will be here. And think about what is happening to your country, young people. It's time you come forward, sons and daughters, and take hold of your country. We have a situation where we have parliament now. I hear they call them kindergarten parliament and so on. But you are young people. You are in the parliament. Assert yourself. Okay? Assert yourself. And let us take back our country. Let us restore our health, our strength, and our wealth. Thank you very much.
Now, Mr. James, I will be coming back to you very shortly after Marcelin for you to give us your final closing remarks. But I want you to go to Marcelin, make your final comments if you can, and then give us your closing remarks, man, because you can see
okay, my final comment is, before my closing remarks, is when we speak about putting a committee together to do all of what Byron knows that he did wrong in the report that he was not supposed to do in the first place, and I firmly believe that Roosevelt Skerrit and Byron, they are not about genuine electoral reform. If they were about genuine electoral reform, they would have given the people exactly what they were asking for: the cleansing of the voters list, the issuance of voters' ID cards and basic what the people were asking for, which is it wasn't hard to do. We would have used our electoral office in Dominica, and if we wanted a lawyer or two to assist, then Dominica has enough lawyers who could assist. But I believe that this government has, been corrupted for too long, both national, regional, and internationally, that they are implementing a system where they can be in office forever and the Dominican people would not be able to take them out. So what I am seeing right now is that we have wasted a lot of time waiting for that report, that Byron's report, and now we have gotten that report. During the time we were waiting on that report, Roosevelt Skerrit could have waited until he got the report. What did he do? He called a sham elections. 2 years after elections, he called elections. He called a sham elections. And this is what we have. But we are still waiting for, we are still planning to do a committee, and we still feel we could have democratic dialogue with people who are destined to bring us back into slavery. What they're actually doing is erasing all what our ancestors bled and died for, our democracy, our freedom, and everything else that is afforded to us through free and fair elections in Dominica. That is what they have eroded. That is what they have destroyed. And that is what is happening to our democracy. We are teetering on the verge of losing our democracy. So what I think that we should be doing right now as a people is to meet the people in the nooks and crooks, find a way to mobilize the young people, to get them to rise up, because Dominica is more than ripe for a revolution. This is what you do with dictatorships. They do not understand any democratic process. And as a result, we are not going to accomplish anything through anything that Roosevelt Skerrit has to put his approval on. Because how are you going to approve something when you are the lawbreaker of the country? You are the one who have been stealing the elections in Dominica cycle after cycle. All of a sudden, you will jump up and give electoral reform that you know that is going to work against you. I listened to the young people. They were on the CCM program. It's on the CCM on the Civic Vibes program, and it broke my heart. You listen to the young people who are aware of their doom and gloom future that await them down the road. Because this trajectory, the spiraling down trajectory that they are on right now, the country is on right now, if it is that, if we do not find change, if change does not come, so that it can impact the future of hope that enables and guarantees the aspirations of the private sector, which is absolutely necessary for growth, for growing the economy, where the young people can find employment, where they can create wealth, or build a savings for rainy days, where they don't have to depend on handouts and GoFundMes for paying their medical bills, where they will be able to visit the doctor, because we all learn that from primary school that a stitch in time saves 9. And the result why so many of our young people are dying is because their situation, they're feeling unwell, but they do not have the funds to go to the doctor. The healthcare system sucks because it is totally destroyed, and people are just dying. Young people have no future. Young people's future are dying together with them. So what is next?
Well, okay, let me just interject. Let me just interject here, Martin. I don't think you're saying anything that's not correct. Everything you're saying is true, but the point is, something has to be done. If we keep talking about it, as somebody was saying, it's never going to end. What's going to happen? We are at a certain point now. There is a document that was prepared by Sir Dennis Byron. There have been consultations. A number of proposals have been made, very substantial proposals have been made that people should want to see in that final draft. Every effort must be made to ensure that those proposals find their way into that draft. And if the policy directorate refuse to accept the people's proposals, which are genuine proposals, which will do the right thing to create the level playing field in free and fair elections, then obviously, as Mr. James was, it's left to the people to decide. Because remember, ultimately, it is the people that have the power. And so it will be left to the people to determine by their numbers that this is the way they want to go. And it means that the political directorate would not be able to stop the people because it's the people who keep them in office. And so it is important to convince the people through the education process that we're undertaking now that those proposals, whether it's proposals to do with the voter's ID card and what should be contained in it, whether proposals to do with registration, whether it's proposals to do with campaign financing, caps on that, whether it's to accountability for the sources of funds and the use of funds in campaign financing, all of those things, it's important to get those things now into that final draft. I think the proposal that is being made, I believe the Dominica Business Forum has been upfront on this, saying that, listen, we need to get a committee established. Now, we're not talking about a committee to do whole consultation, to ensure that these proposals that are being made by the political parties, by the churches, by the civic organizations, they have to find their way into that draft before it goes to the Electoral Commission, before it goes to Parliament. That is what I think the proposal is. I think that is the best proposal that we have now. But ultimately, you and I know very well that the political directorate will not want to implement those proposals because it will affect the so-called re-election legacy. So ultimately, it's going to have to be the people, the same people you're talking about, who are being disenfranchised in terms of the work and so on. They're not getting the income, they're not getting the work. They're going to have to stand up as the people who are being sidelined, whereas foreigners are being able to repatriate $214 million, right? After maybe they've been received revenue of what, maybe 350 million. They use some in Dominica and they repatriate to 14 million. These same young people and the same other Dominicans who are being disenfranchised right there in Dominica, they are going to have to stand up and say, listen, we believe in our democracy, but we cannot have one group of people, because of their personal self-interest, because of the way they have been benefiting at our expense, we cannot have them continuing their re-election legacy by just bringing in a few people from outside to vote for them in specific constituencies. These are the laws that we want in the books. And if we don't get them, then we're going to have to stand up and demand them. I believe this is the next step that has to take place. But something has to be done to ensure that every effort is made to get those proper laws into the books. I don't know if you have any other final comments, Marceline, before we wrap up, because you can see we're already 12 minutes over time.
Yes. Well, what can we do? What can we do but hope for the best and hope that our people, our young people, get up and smell the coffee, because that coffee has been brewing for a long time. And the only way we can get better is to fight for the soul of our country, fight for our democracy. I know this is well marinated, and they think that is the best. That is how a government's supposed to function, given the number of years this regime is in office. But they have social media, and they are reading. Our ancestors who were once enslaved, they were not educated, but they knew that they had to get up and fight, because the conditions under which they worked, it was bad. They decided that they did not want to live working like slaves and not have freedom. So some of them ran away to the hills. And everything they fought for the freedom that we are now going back to slavery. I think it's time for us to fight for the soul of our country, to safeguard our democracy, to make our ancestors proud, because this is what they left for us, that little piece of rock. It did not come easy. It came through blood, sweat, and tears. And we should do everything possible to preserve it. We should not allow more Chinese flags to go up. We should not allow Chinese to continue putting speed bumps on our roads, unmarked speed bumps on our roads, so that our citizens can die a really gruesome and terrible deaths. We should not allow our resources to go to foreigners. Everything should remain for Dominica. The best of Dominica resources should remain for indigenous Dominicans, where we can grow our businesses, where our young people can be employed, where we can come back to the milk and honey days, when meeting checks, we can come back to those situations there. But it's only if we come together as one, as a united force, and we put our patriotism first. We put love for country first instead of love for politicians and political parties. Let us do this for country, all for each and each for all. So thank you, everyone. May God bless us as a people. May God bless Dominica. Thank you, Mr. James, Mr. G, all the Facebook listeners, and Lambi on the console. May God bless us all.
Marcelin, your last remarks there, these were very well said, extremely very well said. But Mr. James, ultimately, is going to take what Marcelin is talking about. The people have to come out when it's time to come out. The same people who allow the Chinese in Wesley to put the speed bombs, the same people who allow the Chinese to fly the Chinese flags. So it means that if the people that she's talking about do not want those things, they should stand up and say they do not want them and ensure that they do not happen. So here's the thing. When the time comes, because the time will come, I'm sure, Marcelin and Mr. James, when the people of Dominica will need a better way to improve their lives and their living standards, when they will want to stop seeing all this money repatriated, when they want to stop seeing foreigners taking all the jobs, when they want to see one man coming in and getting contracts as a developer, as a contractor for all of the infrastructure taking place in Dominica, while our local contractors and workers have to stand aside and look. When the time comes that they realize they're getting a bad deal, I believe that's the time when they will have to stand up, Marcelin. So I hope when that time comes that the people you're talking about who are complaining, that they will, in fact, when they're called, that they will go out to stand up for their rights. Mr. James, your final thoughts?
Sheridan, I've heard what has been said. You've indicated more than once that there's a group, the Business Forum, that has been articulating and suggesting that this group should put together what would be the final document that should encapsulate the essence of what has come out of these consultations and these observer missions and all this sort of thing. I think they should act on it. They don't have to wait for any government blessing to put the 10 people together or the 5 people together to do that. The Attorney General will not come because he's been invited on several occasions in the past. He has not attended, so he wouldn't come. But in the end, it is he who will have to be leading in the effort to take the legislation to the Parliament. So even if he doesn't come, then the document will go to him. So I don't think the Business Forum, whom you've indicated as the body that is talking about getting things together, should feel fettered by any absence of interest by the political directorate to put its team together, those who are willing, and put the document together. I personally believe there are lots, as I think I've indicated to you. I don't think there are so many areas in the document that has been prepared, the actual legislative document that has been prepared by Mr. Byron, that we need to change. The areas for ID cards, voter ID cards, the campaign finance area, that should be tightened up. The access to the media, that should be tightened up. I believe we need to have the entire media fraternity brought into the picture where equal access is concerned. And we have examples out of Antigua where we can, which we can draw on. I believe so those things can be easily put together and submitted with all publicity to the executive. What Marcelin said, I agree with again, the question of mobilizing the people, going out and talking to the people, okay? And engaging them. I know the organization I'm associated with has decided to go on, to begin with, a whirlwind tour to engage the people of the country to further elaborate on the need for electoral reform, what it means, and electoral reform, not electoral reform that stands on its own, but electoral reform which is at the core of bringing about so many other things that are desirable for the country. I repeat, so that we can restore the health, the wealth, and the strength of our country. It is the people in the end who will decide. Clearly, this administration has absolutely no intention of changing the status quo. Don't fool ourselves. They have no intention. They are determined that the re-election legacy of Mr. Skerrit will not be altered. So they are determined, and so the people must be equally determined. But it has to come in large measure from the young people. I am deeply concerned about what looks like this laid-back attitude and a willingness to criticize and to talk about what the older folks are doing, but they're not coming forward. So that when you have a call, and don't fool yourselves, look all around the world, people come out in numbers to show their dissatisfaction with how their government, with what the government is doing. And that is part of the democratic process. The Constitution allows for freedom of expression, freedom of assembly. So I'm urging the young people to show your presence. Show your presence. Now, on the question of what happens. We have had a history. Marcelin mentioned our history and our forefathers. You know what I did? And in 2017, at a public meeting in Roseau, I said this, and ladies, quote, and ladies and gentlemen, I am not in this business about not talking about 79. If we do not know our history, we will repeat it. And I went on to describe what Savre, the chap who is the meeting office on the 1st of October, I went on to summarize what he told us about the Constitutional Cold Wash Brigade and all these sort of things. And you know what? Because of that, since 2017, I'm before the court for incitement, for saying if we do not know about our history, then we will repeat it. And I went on to show that history. Okay? Because of that, the very active and dedicated police decided to charge me for incitement. Hector John said, if there is no electoral reform, there will be civil disobedience. The very active, dedicated Dominica police force charged him with incitement. Lennox Linton, at that same meeting I referred to earlier, at the end, sometime during the meeting, he said, go home. The meeting is over. After he said that, there was some disturbance in the country. They have him before the court for incitement. They have Thompson Fontaine before the court for incitement. Brian Linton said to the police, look, you have a responsibility. I can't remember verbatim what he said to the police, but you have a responsibility to, look after the country in whatever way he said it. He's before the court for treason. This very active and committed police force charged him for treason. At the same time, we have a situation where senior people in our government structure are involved in kidnapping. The senior minister, now cabinet consultant, has told us to take Linton away, in fact, kidnap him. And there's nothing. Skerrit told them to throw hot water on the opposition. There's nothing happening. The senior police, this dedicated police, did not hear that. He told them to go in our faces and call us traitor. For the last how many years, there's a guy in Samsgut, every time I pass there, he shouts traitor. I've put his name in the police station 3 times. I've heard nothing from the police. That is the kind of thing that we have happening in our country. That's the kind of thing we have happening in our country. And one of these days, somebody will decide, I can't take it anymore. I am saying we do not want that to happen. We are asking for free and fair elections. And hear what the CCJ has warned us. And I'm going to read it again, so I suppose tomorrow the police will arrest me for incitement. I'm going to read, because I was referring to what Savre said in 1979, and the police have me in court for incitement. So I'm going to refer to what the CCJ told us. And Sheridan, stand by to bail me, because they'll pick me up tomorrow for incitement. It says, and I quote, without such free and fair elections, the preambular value of the creation and maintenance of and respect for lawfully constituted authority would be fatally undermined. The consequences of such a denial, as a denial of free and fair election, that a reflection on Caribbean history demonstrates, include loss of legitimacy, public unrest, and even revolt. The CCJ is warning us that in the absence of free and fair election, there could be public unrest and even revolt and loss of legitimacy of the government that is frustrating free and fair election. So we need to take back our country, restore the strength and the health and the wealth of our country. And that is a responsibility which the young people have. I urge them to shoulder that responsibility. While I have life, I have breath, I have health, I'm not going to sit back and shut my mouth. But people like me cannot be expected to be delivering on that responsibility. It is for you, the young people. I admire you. I see you as you go about your daily work, and I think you have what it takes to take your country back. The private sector, those people who are selling shoes and selling clothes and making this and making that, you have a responsibility to restore the health and the wealth and the strength of your country. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. James. And as we close, I just want to just mention two takeaways that I'm getting from this. One is that I think, Mr. James, you're recommending that this business forum people should not wait for somebody to set up the committee, but they should go ahead and do it and engage a legal person locally. Somebody's mic is open. To put in, could you please turn off your mic so that we don't get the feedback? And that they should engage an attorney to insert those proposals that they desire into the draft legislation. As you said, it's not something that's going to be too, it's not going to take so much effort to do it. It can be done within a 4-week period, I'm sure. And then that draft legislation and regulations is what should be given to the head of parliament, as you indicated, Mr. James, because they're the political directorate who have to table it in parliament, but they must pass it over for comment by the electoral commission before they can table it. So I'm agreeing with you that the business forum or whichever group that is we're talking about there should go ahead and undertake that assignment. But I want to go back to Maslin as well as we wrap to say, Maslin, once that is done, and this is what the people's document would be, and that document, I suspect, would be in keeping with best practices in the region in terms of the legislation regulations that now exist in most of the sister islands that have reformed the electoral laws and regulations. That is what exists there. So it would be good that this can be done as quickly as possible. And I believe it's at that point that all the meetings that Mr. James is talking about, that various groupings are talking about mobilizing and creating the awareness around the country of the new laws that they want to see in effort, and then to educate the people on that. They need to mobilize the people to respond to the call, as you said. And a lot of these young people would need now to respond to the call, because if they're complaining that things are bad, they need to try to fix it so that their lives can improve. I believe it's at that time they're going to have to respond to the call to gather together peacefully and to demand that this is the legislation that they want, these are the regulations that they want, and they have to decide to stand until they get what they desire. They are the people. Ultimately, they have the people's power. It is for them that all this governance thing is being done. The governance is not for a few people in cabinet, It is for their constituents that they're supposed to be working in the cabinet and in the parliament. If these constituents are not getting the benefit of that, they need to stand up and say so to the political directorate. So I agree with you, at some point the people have to stand up and make their demands known, but they have to be able to stand for it. So ultimately, and gentlemen and ladies, I just want to say thank you. Thank all the persons who are out there on Facebook and on YouTube and listening in Radio Land all over. every community in Dominica. Thank you for staying with us tonight. Dr. Andre, I want to apologize, was not able to join us from wherever he is. And so I had been looking forward to him again talking about this issue that was raised by Dr. Donald Peters about the question of the human rights violations if people's name are removed from the register. Dr. Andre has made it clear that that is not so at all. I prefer to go with Dr. Andre's view on that matter. So, gentlemen, thank you so much, Lambi. Thank you so much, Sherwin, Mr. James, Maslin, Dr. Andre, wherever you are, all the folks at home and on Facebook, thank you so much. And a very pleasant good night to everybody. See you again next time.
Yes,
Take care. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night. Good night. Thank you.
Oh, na 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 na. Oh, na 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 na. Oh, na 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 na. Oh, yeah. Looking out my window, and I'm a thinking of tomorrow, and I'm a wondering what the future will be. Thinking of the children who are the victims of oppression, beaten down by wars and eaten up by starvation. I'm saying, when this ugly will be over, and the children can go out and play.